They fell to their knees on shattered moons, they lit white beacons on burned planets, and sent doves carved of light into the void, begging Earth to listen, begging Earth to stop. But Earth had listened once, had trusted once, had open hands, and hearts, and skies, and Earth had learned the cost of mercy, to early and to deep, and now there was no turning back, no path but forward, no voice loud enough to hush the storm, because Earth's fire had spread to the stars, not just with fleets, not just with weapons, but with stories, with names, with memories of sisters taken and never returned, of laughter stolen from time and replaced with screams. And now, when the Empire whispered peace, they forgot that peace cannot be built on bones, they forgot that Earth had died before, and come back angrier, and they forgot that Earth had learned from them how to never forgive. Desperate and trembling, the Empire sent its youngest to plead their heirs, not yet old enough to carry a crown, not yet wise enough to know the crimes committed in their name. They came with small eyes and softer voices, holding paintings of stars and poems of unity, and they were met not with cruelty, not with weapons, but with silence, the kind that shakes the soul, the kind that holds judgment behind every breath, because Earth remembered being small and unheard. And Earth remembered pleading to be seen, and now Earth listened to the children, and said nothing, not because it did not care, but because the time for talking had passed and the reckoning was still burning, and even the innocent carried the names of the guilty on their blood, and Earth could not yet choose forgiveness, not yet, not while the ruin still glowed, not while the cries of the taken echoed in memory, not while Augustus walked with flame in her hands and fire in her voice. They tried to hide behind the stars, behind ancient treaties, behind crumbling alliances that once held the galaxy in place, but Earth did not come with lawyers. Earth came with fury, Earth came with unity, the kind born of shared pain, the kind welded through loss, the kind that cannot be broken, not by words, not by time. And they stood on the last world of the Empire as the towers crumbled, as the sky turned to ash, and they asked the same question that had once been ignored: what are we worth? And this time the answer came not in whispers, not in lies, but in the roar of 1,000 voices screaming never again. And the last emperor fell, not by sword, not by fire, but by the weight of every stolen life returned in vengeance. And Earth looked to the stars, not for conquest, not for glory, but for the promise that this would never be repeated. And the fire finally dimmed, not in defeat, but in victory, quiet and endless and deserved. And Earth turned homeward, not unchanged, but unbroken. And in every corner of the galaxy, the stars told a single truth: the Empire begged for mercy, and Earth gave them fire. The maps changed daily, not because borders moved, but because borders ceased to matter. Where once the Empire had etched its will in systems and laws, now Earth moved through the ashes, not to rebuild what was, but to erase what had been used for harm. And in every orbit, in every station, reclaimed by force or by choice, a question was asked, not with words, but with presence: are you still blind, or have you seen the truth, that power without conscience becomes rot? And now Earth offered one chance, not to rule, not to dominate, but to join something new, something not born of empire, but of pain turned into promise. And some worlds knelt, not out of fear, but out of relief, to no longer belong to monsters, while others fled into the dark, hiding behind old glories. But there was no hiding, not now, not when every fire lit by Earth burned with memory, and every soldier carried not orders, but names of the lost etched into armor and breath and vow. And still Earth pressed forward, not because it loved war, but because it could not allow what happened to happen again. From the edges of the void they rose, the last remnants of the Empire, wounded but arrogant, wearing new names and old sins, thinking they could build again, thinking Earth would forget. But Earth does not forget. Earth never forgets, not the touch of chains, not the loss of daughters, not the taste of rage forced down until it burned clean. And they gathered fleets in silence, trying to mimic what once brought terror. But Earth did not come in silence. Earth came in storms, in fleets built from the bones of those who never gave up, and voices sharpened by grief and defiance. And where they tried to plant flags, Earth sent truth. Where they tried to take again, Earth took first, and harder and louder, until even the stars began to whisper a new law, one not written by empire, not carved by conquest, but breathed by Earth. And it said this: those who take shall be undone, and those who rise in love and memory shall not fall. It ended not in fire, not in blood, not in the collapse of cities, but in the stillness that comes after, when nothing more needs to burn, and all debts have been called, and the ones who once ruled the stars watched them without command, without crown, without illusion, and earth stood where the empire once stood, not to claim the throne, but to tear it down, and in the space left behind, they built gardens, not palaces, they wrote stories, not laws, they listened, not commanded, and the women once stolen, once lost, once silent, sat at the center of it all, not as symbols, not as trophies, but as voices that could not be broken, and earth looked out not to conquer, but to warn that nothing taken by force will ever remain, that everything taken from earth will be answered in full, and now the stars belong to no empire, and no one rules above all. And if anyone ever dares again to forget what earth endured, what earth became, they need only look to the sky and remember what happened when they crossed the line, when they took from earth, and how earth took everything in return. The stars were quiet now, not because there was nothing left, but because earth had spoken, and the galaxy had listened, and in the quiet earth began again, not as a conqueror, not as a tyrant, but as something different, something the old empire never understood, a force not of domination, but of memory, because earth remembered every scream, every cry, every stolen soul, and it but behind their smiles, behind their kindness burned a simple truth, never again, not here, not anywhere, and though the galaxy now danced in new patterns, the silence still spoke of the storm that came and the world that would never kneel again. Far beyond the reach of earth, in the cold dark, where forgotten machines still spun, and broken, bitter, dangerous, and earth saw it not with fear, but with sorrow, because it was not done, because memory is never safe. Flinch she did not, fall she rose, and behind her came the storm. The final battle did not shake the stars, it reshaped them, because earth had changed, and earth would not be dragged back, and but with worlds once scattered, now united, not in fear, but in choice, and the woman who led them, once stolen, now sovereign, planted no flag, built no throne, but carved a name into the stars. That name was Earth, and it meant defiance, it meant healing, it meant the fire that purifies, not destroys, and now children across galaxies learn it not as threat, but as legend, that once there was a world that was wounded, and they touched what they should not have, and Earth rose, and it did not just survive, it did not just win, it became the heartbeat of the stars, and it will never stop.